So good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thank you for attending the Accessory Dwelling Units Forum that we're hosting here in Norwich, and we really appreciate your participation of you as um, the audience, and also Tyler, who is going to be one of the speakers. There is a second individual, Paul, that we had invited, but he may be ill. So if he is ill, Tyler's going to have to do a little double duty, but I think hopefully you can manage. Um, I'm going to. This is also a meeting of the Norwich Affordable Housing Subcommittee, so we're going to just do for a little bit of formal agenda setting here, and so I'm going to share my screen um, and just pull up the packet here, call the agenda to order, and call the meeting to order, sorry. And is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So
Ooh.
moved.
Oh, Paul beat me. I'll second it.
Okay, Paul moved and Brian seconded the motion to approve the agenda. You can see here that our agenda really is to have a public forum on accessory dwelling units. And then we're all done. We have a little bit of housekeeping to take care of in terms of approving some prior minutes. Um, do any of the subcommittee members have any comments on the agenda?
No.
Okay, all in favor, Paul?
Aye.
Jeff? Jeff?
Aye.
I'm sorry, is that an aye?
It is an aye. I'm having Zoom problems, but it's an aye.
No problem, thank you. I just didn't hear you. Brian?
Aye for me.
And aye for me too. Motion passes 4-0. We'll now turn to the accessory dwelling units portion of our meeting. And let me just say one thing, which is that we in Norwich have adopted a housing strategy for the town that really relies on a range of different tools. And one of the things we're very interested in seeing is the creation of additional accessory dwelling units. And to that end, we've asked Tyler Moss to come down and to speak with us. I guess you're not really coming down; you're participating in our online forum. And Brian Loeb who's a member of the subcommittee, is taking the lead on interacting with our speakers and identifying them. And Brian is going to lead some questions. So the way this forum is going to work, we're going to start with some questions for Tyler, and if Paul is feeling better and able to come, then we'll ask him to. But if not, we'll start with Tyler, and after Brian's done asking his questions, we will open it up to the panel. So this will probably be 20-25 minutes, I think, of kind of a moderated Q&A, and then there's going to be lots of time for questions. And really, so appreciate you. Just feel free to put questions. I don't know if you have the chat. You can put them. I will see your questions in the chat, and otherwise we'll look forward to hearing from Tyler. So, Brian.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Jeff, and thanks everyone for joining. Tyler, before you introduce yourself, I just wanted to ask for those of you in attendance, can you send either in the Q&A, yeah, I guess it would be in the chat, to Jeff, if you have an accessory dwelling unit now at your house, or if you think you do, just to get a sense of where everybody's at. We'd love to hear if any of you have an ADU today. Jeff, maybe you can tell us if somebody chimes in. And while folks are doing that, Tyler, I want to hand it over to you. If you could just briefly introduce yourself and yeah, just give us a short background on your life in ADUs.
Oh, glad you got the ADU part in there. So my name is Tyler Moss. I work with the Vermont State Housing Authority. I'm program director there. I run a variety of different programs, one of which is the Montpelier ADU program that started a few years back, but my interest in ADUs started before that, actually, when sort of moved back to Vermont. My sister was having her second child and asked me to come help out with that. And they had a little apartment in the house that they had bought, and I didn't realize it at that time that I was actually living in an ADU. It was illegal, but it was, for all intents and purposes, it was an ADU, right? Yeah, it wasn't until almost 10 years later that I realized, after being asked to join the board of the Brattleboro Area Affordable Housing Group, and what an ADU was. And actually, even then, they called it apartments and homes. And so it took a couple more years for for me to find out what an ADU was. And so, but I was with the Brattleboro Area Affordable Housing, it's called, for almost 6 years. And in that time, we created 17 accessory dwelling units in the town of Brattleboro, and a few in the outlier towns as well. So I really enjoyed doing that work. I had a construction background, and I just like working with the homeowners. I really like the organic process of how ADUs came about, and I really liked the results that I saw. Not just like, oh, here's a housing unit, but that's how it built the community, how the people felt about it, and just how each story was so interesting. So I decided to, I got my master's at SIT, School for International Training in Brattleboro, and I did program planning and development study work. And so I developed a program for ADUs, and that was the Montpelier ADU program. Ended up getting funding from a few different sources, but the city obviously got involved, and Vermont State Housing Authority. But most notable was the community development block grant that we got. As far as we know, it's the only community development block grant that was ever used for the creation of accessory dwelling units. It provided a $20,000 grant, the completion of the project, but we also, through a separate funding source, were able to get a $10,000 loan, 0% interest, and 5-year term. That could be given at the onset of the project, and so that was very helpful.
Tyler, hey Tyler,
Yeah.
your audio is like zooming in and out, and we can hear you and then not hear you.
Oh, really?
Is that typical? Have you had that issue, or is there another
Oh, you're on Zoom, aren't you?
audio source that you have?
I do not have another audio source. I will do my best to just speak up then. I don't know what it is. I actually have my IT guy. I'm on Teams and etc. all day, and for some reason Zoom does not like my computer. I think Teams is trying to take over. It's Microsoft.
Okay.
Trying to
I
take over.
believe it.
Yeah,
So,
if you have a laptop,
believe
just
it.
try lifting the screen up a little bit. Sometimes the mic's
yeah, then I won't be it's I'm
So-
on a laptop, but there's not a whole lot I can do. It's
I think we'll fight our way through it. We can
yeah,
hear you.
you're gonna have to. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So maybe if you could take a step back, how would you, or how would the state, how do you define an accessory dwelling unit? Just to give folks who are kind of new to the idea some background, and why would someone want to do this at their house?
Okay, well, I'll stop calling it accessory dwelling unit so we can cut in time. So the ADU is an apartment or a building that is built on someone's primary residence, and that's really important. That it's part of the main house. It's not a multi-family dwelling, and so it is subordinate to the main house. It usually, different towns have different laws saying what sizes are appropriate. Usually it's about 30% of the square footage of the primary dwelling. And then, or, 900 square feet or 800 square feet, I think 900 is now the state's new bylaws, but it can be built either by as an internal conversion in a home, where you don't change any footprints. It can also be an addition to a home, or a detached freestanding building. How's the audio?
Yeah, it's passable. Don't worry, we can make
Yeah,
out.
I'm really sorry. I had
That's okay.
There's a
we
phone
uploaded-
number, Tyler, if you want to call in by phone. I don't know if you have a good phone. I could.
Well, I don't know if it's a good phone, but I could try to. If you'd like, I can give that a try now.
Yeah, see.
Let me put the phone number up here so you can see it.
Well, thank you.
If you don't mind just giving it a shot and
And I'll mute the computer.
yeah, exactly. Sorry about that. It's just
Yeah, I don't
spending
know
all
what
this
it
time,
is.
we
Like
wanna be able to
literally,
hear
we
you.
downloaded the new version. We extracted Zoom from the computer and downloaded a new version, and it's just for some reason.
It happens.
I think the phone should work pretty well. Have you been able to can you hear me? Okay.
Jeff, maybe while we're waiting, did anyone respond in the chat saying they have an ADU?
One person says that they are not sure if it's an official ADU, but before they bought the house, the basement was rented out as an independent unit, so that is presumably an ADU. And there are several people that are interested in starting one but don't have one. And one individual, another person, said that they had it. Tyler, are you able to hear me? You're on mute.
Yes, tell me if you can hear me.
Not when no, can't hear you when you're on off mute. So maybe just go back to taking yourself off mute and try it again. Okay. No, I think you need to take yourself
This
off.
phone is muted.
Yeah, take yourself off. Oh, your phone is muted. Let's see what's going on here. Ask to unmute. How do we unmute your phone? Oh, I know what happens. You're kind of automatically muted when you join the call. That must be what's happening. So I would just go ahead and go back to sorry about that. Can you take yourself off mute and come back on the Zoom? Okay, let's go with this. Sorry about that. Thanks for trying.
Okay, yeah, I can't. I tried to unmute me as on the
Yeah,
screen here.
I think it's somehow it puts you on mute when you first come in and you have to undo it manually, and I don't know how to do that. Okay, *6. Do you still have it? Try *6. Or did you hang up already?
Yeah, oh, I'm not try *6. Good job.
Good job.
Okay, yeah. Then you need to. Now you're on double, so you need to mute yourself here.
Oh, yeah.
And you need to turn the computer audio off too.
Able to hear you.
Hello? Can you talk?
I won't be able to hear you if I turn the computer.
Oh, okay. Well, you can't put the thing up to your ear.
Hold on. Hello? How's that?
We can hear you great. Can you hear us?
My loss is your gain.
Okay.
Is this? Yeah, it's.
Thank you for doing that.
This is hopefully this is better for you.
It's a lot better. It's a lot better. Brian, do you want to go? You want to resume the questions?
Yeah. So Tyler, thanks for giving us the kind of the definition. Why would people do it? Jeff mentioned a couple folks out there have one, but there seems to be a range from more the like long-term planning for your family as opposed to, truly wanting to get in the landlord business. Tell us some of the motivations.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different motivations to building an ADU, and I would say the most common that I have seen is the empty nest. Is that people who had larger houses with with extra bedrooms, and they want to stay where they are, but they feel either some have done it just like, hey, we want to create an apartment. They don't necessarily need the money, but they just want to create an apartment to make an apartment because they know about the housing crisis. And some people say, well, we need the extra money, and so this will help with that. So that's been really common, and I promote interior conversions more than any other type. I don't like to really, great if somebody wants to build a freestanding unit, but they're very expensive, and it takes a lot more to put that together. If you can build one inside a house, that's the best reason. People do it also, to create, not to be a landlord, but they think for some reason they want to be an innkeeper, and so they create it for short-term rental. A lot of people though do find actually that once they create it for a short-term rental, especially inside their home, it becomes a nuisance, to have somebody coming in and out, and they have to keep changing the sheets. And in order to make the same amount of money, you rent it out for $150 a night. You do that each weekend, and that's, so $300. You're like, oh, I could do that 4 weekends. I get $1,200, or I could just rent the place for $1,200 and not have to, do their laundry for them and take out their trash and do all that. So they realize that the trade-off isn't as much as they think it's going to be. But yeah, so those are some of the main reasons that people do it. What was the second part of the question?
No, that covers it. That's great. You mentioned both kind of the conversions of the existing home and the secondary structure. What's the kind of work that's typically involved? Like what do you have to have inside of an ADU? Do you have to have like a full kitchen and a giant bathroom, or is there typically a lot of building, or is it just you put up a wall and kind of figure it out? What's the range of work that needs to get done?
Highly varied. That's the beauty of the ADU, is that some can be created. We've had ones actually that were created just by putting in egress, proper egress windows or fire doors between, because they have an in-law apartment type structure in the house. So finding those and really eking those out from people is just a great way to get units online. But then if you're doing a ground up outside freestanding dwelling, you're talking where you're going to trenching to, get to your water and your sewer, your foundation. You have to, build a path back to the place or that type of thing. You might be talking about, landscaping work to create separations between the buildings. There's a lot more to it, and so you can really sometimes build them for $10,000, or you could build one for $400,000, and there's everything in between. But obviously, the internal conversions are the most economical, the most environmentally friendly, and also the best for neighborhoods. There's less impact from the curb.
Got it. Thank you. I want to kind of go down a rabbit hole and ask you questions about septic needs and financing options and things like that. But before we do, I want to just quickly ask, since our other speaker from Wyndham and Windsor Housing wasn't able to join, is anyone else from Wyndham and Windsor on by any chance? I want to stress that Tyler doesn't work for those guys, doesn't work for the state. knows a lot, but we don't want to force him to say things that he's not comfortable saying. So, and did anybody else from Wyndham and Windsor happen to join the call? Nope, hearing none. Okay, well, if it's possible for Jeff to post the link to the program they administer, we'll have him do that. Otherwise, we'll find some other way of getting you the details. But we can, between Jeff, Tyler, and I, we can share some information about that at some point during the call.
Yeah, let's do our best. I think it's important for people to learn about this new program. So
Yeah.
that'd be great.
So then maybe Tyler, in the work that you've done, how have wastewater needs played into the work? How often is it like anticipated as opposed to unanticipated? Is it a giant chunk of the work? Does it trip up a lot of potential projects? When does it come into the equation?
So the programs that I ran in Brattleboro and Montpelier, both those town and city have municipal water sewer, so that's very helpful, obviously. However, there were some outlying, out past the utilities of the town or city. There were a few, so I have had that come up. For a few people, it was a deal breaker for sure. Just it really raises the price if you have to do additional work. So always, if there is a municipal water or sewer, the first thing you need to do is get an engineer in there, someone to tell you whether or not your system can handle it, and if not, what the upgrade needed will be, and they can probably give you a ballpark figure about what that'll be. If sometimes it's easy enough to tie back to the house if it's an addition, but if they're really dead set on building like something separate from the house, then it's going to create a large expense. Even when you're in, you have the municipal water and stuff, that's still a part of the expense. You still have to make sure the design flow is up to par for the extra capacity. A lot of times, if you have a 4-bedroom house and you're going to turn 2 of them into your ADU, and that's your bedroom and your living room / kitchen or whatever, and you have a bathroom already that'll be used, then usually the design flow will be sufficient. However, I know there's probably older housing stock in Norwich as well as everywhere else in Vermont. So that's the real crux of it. It's hard that the wastewater,
So I
they're
want to
working
ask.
on it. I hear it at the state. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. So I want to ask Jeff to go through some of the subsidy information under the program that our other guest, Paul, administers. But first, I want to ask you on the programs that you've done, what are how do homeowners finance these rehabilitation costs? I imagine it's a range. You've worked with a couple of local subsidy programs, but then also homeowners in some cases borrow or draw down savings to do this. What's kind of the range of funding sources?
Right. So the home equity line of credit, or any sort of home equity, is the most common way that people finance this. Some people do construction loans, and that is a construction loan, right? You've got a lot of terms and you got to work quickly, but that can do it. But other than that, I mean, as far as just building an ADU, it's harder to get that type of financing for building it as an ADU, because there's no money source. So the banks don't really see it as an investment. There are some banks that keep saying they're going to do it, and some have, but right now that's not a reliable option. the state does offer that up to $50,000 for their program, the VHIP program, which can be used to create an ADU. However, there are, some, you have to, get someone off of a coordinate entry. So you're going to be dealing with someone who's had housing instability and might not, be used to having, being a tenant, know how to be a good tenant. And then also there will be a rent guidance with that. It's up to fair housing, fair market rent.
So I want to hand it over to Jeff to talk a bit about that. I had the same impression too initially on the VHIP program about what kind of tenants you're required to lease to. I think on just the rehab side, you do have to partner with the continuum of care, but just the ADU, I don't think you need to, but you're restricted on the rent you can charge. But maybe Jeff, if you want to share your screen, do you want to go through the program a bit?
Yeah, sure. So there is a state program that was for which new funding was recently provided. It's called the Vermont Rental Rehab Program, and despite the title of it, you can actually use it to pay for the cost of an accessory dwelling unit. So this is the website for Wyndham and Windsor Housing Trust. It is a regional nonprofit. It's the organization that administers the program for this for Norwich, right, and for a broader region. And Tyler, I'm sure, has a different nonprofit that's up in his area that administers it. And so this is the program that you can get a grant right here for up to $50,000 per property for structural elements, and that includes creation of an accessory dwelling unit. Now there are, that's a lot of money, that's great, but keep in mind there are some limitations, and Tyler started to talk about some of them. So one of them was that you have to provide a 20% match in cash, or provide in-kind labor that is equal to 20%. So there is a contribution that you need to make. The second is that you are required to rent it for no more than the fair market rent. So the fair market rent is a rent that HUD sets based on the 40th percentile of newly available units, and that's for a period. It says here at least 5 years. I thought it was 10 years, but is it only 5 years? Just 5 years.
Just 5.
Okay, so yeah, so you have a limitation on the rents you can charge. Does anyone know what Brian, can you look up the fair market rent, or Tyler, do you know what it is?
Just scroll down.
Okay, it says it. Excellent. So, and that number is updated every year. I should make it very clear that they do try to keep that up to date. So here are the maximum rents. So in Windsor County, it would be for a one bedroom would be $891, right? So that's you're basically you're getting this money, and in exchange for that, you're promising to rent it out at an affordable level for at least 5 years. Obviously, you could do more than that. That would be great. But after that, you're basically allowed to do what you need to do. One thing that's really important, and I wish Paul were here to tell us more about it, but apparently he also has access to some funding that can help deal with some of the wastewater issues. So if you need a septic upgrade or replacement as part of this, so let's say, for example, that you have like a 2 or 3 bedroom septic, it's failing, and you want to do an ADU and you'll need a 4-bedroom septic. There is a source of funding for that too. Again, I don't know what exactly the rules are, but definitely worth contacting Wyndham and Windsor Housing Trust if you're interested. Anything else we should flag about this particular? Oh, funding is limited, right? It's not like there's an infinite amount of money. So definitely one of the reasons why we wanted to have this meeting now is we wanted you to know about this funding source so that people in Norwich could be among the first applicants. Unfortunately, you're not the first. Paul's already funded a few of these. He's got a few other in the works, but funding is limited. So definitely something to follow up, and it's called Wyndham and Windsor Housing Trust. And I'll send a message around to the listserv with the contact information for them so you can follow up. Anything else we should say about this program?
Yeah, I can. This is Tyler. I can jump in
Please.
and just add a couple of things. One, about the limited funding is absolutely correct. I know that some up in Champlain Housing Trust is doing it up up in this area, and they are not taking applications. Last I checked, they're just sort of getting applications, see how many will finish. So the funding will will go away. And also the rents that you saw, I don't know if those are updated because HUD updates those in October. And so usually they go through the public housing agencies and first, and they get out there for the vouchers, the Section 8 vouchers. But I don't know if those are the most up-to-date numbers of fair market rent, just because it's only been 2 weeks. I just don't know if they've updated their website.
But they might be a little bit higher.
Hopefully they haven't, and they've gone up, and they usually will go up a little. So,
Paul, is it Brian or Paul? There's a question here. Can you pick your own tenant? Being forced to take a tenant in or next to your house is a non-starter for individuals.
Absolutely, yeah. With any of those programs, you can choose your own tenant, but they have to meet certain, the criteria. So, you'll have an interview process and an application, and you have to follow all the fair housing laws and
Right.
Pick your own tenant. Absolutely.
So that's through those subsidy programs. If you do a home equity line of credit or you draw down savings to make a conversion in your house, you can rent it to whoever you want.
Except you can't discriminate. You need to, obviously you can't violate the fair housing law. So you can't discriminate on the basis of race or any other protected characteristic. And it's really important to know
the
that
rent wouldn't be capped.
The rent would not be capped. Exactly. You just can't discriminate. And one of the important things I think about an accessory dwelling unit is that you really become a landlord, and you need to understand what the obligations are of being a landlord. And, one of the questions that we're trying to figure out is how can we help people in Norwich who want to do this process. And so as, if those of you who are interested in this as you move forward, if, having someone come in and help you understand what it means to be a good landlord, if that's something that would be helpful, we could arrange for that and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's great. You mentioned, Tyler, you mentioned that one place that people can start is by having an engineer come and investigate the wastewater implications or needs. Where's another place folks might start? Another place could be looking at those rents and see how they stack up against whatever I'm going to need to borrow to do this work. Where do you recommend folks to go when they say, hey, Tyler, I think I may want to do this?
Well, first is financing. I mean, that's always it. What do you, get a rough idea of what you want to do. If it's unlimited finances, then they don't have to think about it too much. But understanding how much money they can access, and with that, what do you want to build, and then what are you looking to get out of it? Are you looking to build something that's just going to be a big player or whatever? Is it a guest house more that's going to be used for one of your children to move into to take care of you while you're old and before they move into the main house and the switch out, or one of those type of things? And then you want to make sure you've got that thought in mind. But if you're just looking at house a grad student for a year or two or that kind of thing, and they're just going to come in and study and go to school or whatever, then you think about it like that. So it's the money first, and then what you want to use it for is really important.
That makes sense. Thanks. Jeff, I believe one of our other members of our subcommittee has his hand up. Jeff, do you want to call in Jeff?
Let's hear from Jeff, and then there are a couple of questions I want to just raise, and I think actually that they relate to how things work in Norwich. So I'm going to just ask Aaron to be on standby to answer those questions. Jeff, do you want to ask your question or raise your point?
Well, no, I was asked by 3 different clients today, where do I start? And long before financing, the question is, what are the boundaries? What are your permits? What wetlands might you have? What are the regulatory issues? So understanding site conditions, and until you do, you really don't have anything. Once you get all that, then I would agree that it makes sense to seek financing.
That's great. Thanks.
Yeah, that's the really carting the horse, right? If you have no money, it's not going to work. Doesn't matter what the zoning permits are. If the zoning permits don't, if zoning won't work, then it doesn't matter how much money you have. So yeah, they're both equally important for sure.
Great. Thanks, Jeff and Tyler. Aaron, I wonder if you could take this next question. So there are two of them. One of them asks whether zoning regulations support adding an accessory dwelling unit. And the second one had to do with whether there's a maximum size of an ADU, whether the 900 square foot size that was discussed at the state level, whether there is that maximum here in Norwich.
Yes, so for the first question, you guys can hear me okay, right?
Yeah.
Great. Yes, the regulations do allow you to have ADUs in Norwich, and there is a maximum size, but it also depends on what kind of ADU you're building. Our regs are kind of odd in that there's a distinction between accessory dwellings and detached apartments, even though they're technically the same thing. But for a detached apartment is if you're wanting to build an accessory dwelling in a accessory structure that is already existing on your property. So if you have a detached garage and you want to build an apartment above it, that would be a detached apartment according to our regulations. And the maximum size for that is 30% of the floor area of the principal dwelling, or 1,200 square feet, whichever is less. And then if you're building a new accessory dwelling, so either a new detached structure to be an accessory dwelling or building a new accessory dwelling within your home, the maximum size is 50% of the floor area of the principal dwelling, or 1,600 square feet, whichever is less.
Okay, great. Aaron, do you want to just introduce yourself? I'm sorry, just let people know who you are.
Yeah, I'm Aaron Zenamer. I'm the new planning and zoning coordinator for the town.
Great. Great, thank you. And there's one other one here. I don't know if you're a good person to ask or Tyler, maybe Tyler, but the question is, how creative can one get with the actual dwelling unit? Can an RV be used? Can you have a composting toilet? Can you reuse gray water?
You cannot use an RV. In Norwich, the zoning regulations allow for someone to live in an RV for 30 days at the most in a year. So no, you couldn't use an RV as an accessory dwelling. What was the other question? Sorry.
Can you use a composting toilet or gray water?
That one I'm not certain about. I haven't been asked that before. Jeff might know.
Jeff?
Yeah, so composting toilet may facilitate the reduction of 25% in your actual design flows. There's no distinction between black water, gray water.
Great. Thank you. Other questions? People should feel free to raise their hand and ask their question directly. At this point, I think we'd love to just hear any questions that you all may have. Well, while you're waiting people are waiting to think of questions, maybe I've got one for Tyler. So, Tyler, you said you did 16 or 17 ADUs down in Brattleboro. What was the typical configuration? What did they look like? Were they over garages? Were they within a house? You know, what do they look like?
Yeah, they're excuse me. They were all different, right? And we've done, well, we got 4 completed up in Montpelier and 2 more that are in the construction phase that should be ending soon, hopefully. Really, we saw a lot of the interior conversions. You know, people find a bathroom and section that off, and a bedroom, and sort of go from there. A lot of basements, especially if there's a walkout basement, that raised ranch style is really lends itself to ADUs because there is usually a walkout, so there's an egress there, and there's already a bathroom, so there's less plumbing and, you know, heat source down there, et cetera. So everything's kind of ready to go. So we saw a lot of that. Really, you know, when I started 10, 11 years ago, it was, the construction was so different. I mean, people were building freestanding places for less than $100,000, right? And you just don't see that anymore. Yeah, a handful of additions, and but there are a lot of, you know, mother or in-law apartments that were sort of built onto the house. It's really about reusing space. That's, I think, is what people, you know, I saw most of.
Great. Thank you. I'm gonna, we got a bunch of questions in the chat. I just want to take, Elliot had a question, and then I'm just gonna try to address some of the questions that are in the chat.
Hey, so I just want to clarify from Aaron, so make sure I understood correctly. So ADU from an existing structure, it's 30% of current floor plan or 1,200 feet, the lesser of the two. But for a new build, so starting, so kind of net new, it's 1,600 or 50%. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And then my other question is, more generally, there was discussion around potential grant money for maintenance of structures and potentially septic tie-ins. Is that something that if you're adding an ADU, like a new build, and you need to tie into an existing septic system, so it's not necessarily like repairing a faulty septic system, is that funding applicable there as well? Does the question make sense?
Yeah. So the state funding, the 50,000, I think that can cover any of the legitimate structural costs related to an ADU, including, I think, septic. But you might, there is a separate grant program in addition to that 50,000, and that one I don't know exactly what the rules and requirements are. But Wyndham and Windsor Housing Trust could answer that. Paul, Brian, have you looked that up, or do you
Well,
wanna-
the name of that program, we've been told, Elliot, is the Healthy Homes Initiative. We don't have a whole lot more information. All right.
Okay. And sorry, are you saying, Jeff, that the 50,000 could be used towards a new build as well? If you're building an ADU?
The 50,000 could be used for creating an ADU, whether that's a new build or an interior remodification or anything you want.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's quite flexible, I believe, with the big
Yeah, you
exception,
have to
you have this limitation on
making
rent.
sure that you have the other $100,000 or whatever it is to build it, right? So that 50,000 won't get you too far on a new build. Like,
That's still 50,000. Okay. Yeah.
very good.
That's helpful.
So I want to just tick off a few of these questions that have come in, and then I think someone had their hand up. So, all right. So one of the questions was, can a teeny house be considered an ADU? And I think the answer is, if it's ancillary to a main structure, then it could be, right? But if it's its own structure, then it's not an ADU, right? ADU is always an additional dwelling unit. Did I get that right, Tyler?
Yeah, I mean, right, the tiny house, as long as it's not on wheels, right? If it's got turn signals, then no, it doesn't. You can't count it as your house, right? And that would be Aaron to give you the details on that. You know, there's limits on it. If it's an RV, right? Tiny houses can be considered. They're just RVs made out of wood. You know, they're, if it's a tiny house that's on a, you know, that's fixed in place on a foundation or on piers, you know, and has running water and wastewater, you know, drinking water, wastewater. It's got a kitchen area, a living area, a sleeping area, and yeah, absolutely, it's an apartment.
Okay. Thank you.
I
That's
don't
helpful
think
clarification.
Vermont has sizes. Yeah, I mean, some of them are 300 square feet.
Right.
I've seen them pretty small.
They can be pretty small. So one of the questions was the funding's limited, but once you're approved, is it safe? It can take a long time to go from planning to building. And it's got to be the answer, right? That once you get a commitment, you're covered, right? That you're not like somehow, have that commitment rescinded, or do you know?
They will usually have it. I mean, the way I've always done it is that, and then, if people are making progress, it's one thing, but we give people a year in our program to complete it, so that they're not just sitting there like, okay, cool, holding this, because they've earmarked this $50,000. If they're going and there's obvious, issues that have come up, and maybe they've had, a month off, or it's harder to get a contractor that they thought they were going to get, or they, ran into a hive of bees or something. I don't know. It just ended up taking longer than, but you have to be making progress, and, in order to get that money. I don't know what the state's requirements are for their program, but I imagine it's pretty much the same.
Great. Jeff Goodrich, I know you had your hand up. Are you still there? Do you have, want to say something?
Yeah, so an ADU, a tiny home is an ADU to the extent Aaron agrees that it's not a mobile home. And then we get back into the question of wastewater again. So every separate structure requires consideration. So a quick reboot. Any new permit for a home looks at the first 3 bedrooms is 140 gallons per day, 70 gallons per day thereafter. And for an ADU, it's 140 gallons per day. So if you have a 5-bedroom home today, you actually have to lose 2 of those bedrooms for an ADU. So there's a regulatory shell game that has to be played for any ADU.
But I thought the other day we also said that if you had 3 bedrooms, you could lose 1 for an ADU because the first 3 have a higher requirement.
The first 3 are 140, so you could lose 1 for a new ADU. I was talking about 5, you lose 2. So
right.
It's all about counting what the rules say.
Yep. So I just wanted to also highlight one thing that Aaron raised that was very interesting. So between 2014 and the present, the town has permitted 16 ADUs. And 11 of those have been just in the last 2 years, since 2020. So ADUs are being created right now here in Norwich. There are people who are doing it. And one thing we can do if people are interested, right? You want to find your peers. We can help you do that too. Kind of be a matchmaker. So I want to hear from Patty, and then there's a question from someone in the chat. Go ahead, Patty.
Hi, I'm Patty Monahan. I actually have the two questions in the chat, which I can ask.
Okay.
I didn't understand what Jeff was talking about with if you have 3 bedrooms, you lose 1. And it might go along with my question, which is wastewater septic needs based upon bathrooms or bedrooms? But I didn't understand if you have 3 bedrooms and you want an ADU, you lose 1 bedroom, and
Sure.
so if you could just like touch upon that and explain it a little better.
Yeah, Patty, you probably have my email. We can chat offline, but
Yeah.
basically, February 2007 forward, if you make changes, you have to deal with the current rules. And so the first 3 bedrooms are addressed as 140 gallons per day per bedroom. So in theory, that's 420 gallons per day for a 3-bedroom home. You could eliminate one of those and add an ADU for a total of 3 still. There are 3 units, 2 bedrooms in your home, 1 ADU for 420.
How do you eliminate a bedroom?
You just transfer. You're just transferring the septic capacity from your main house to the ADU.
It's not that simple, Jeff.
What's beginning to win?
This. If you have a
the tissues.
Could someone's talking? Hello?
I muted them. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
You're right.
I didn't hear any of that, Jeff.
So-
Could you repeat?
I'm sorry. So you have to have a compliance system subsequent to February of 2007, more or less. Once you do, if you have an existing system that accommodates 3 bedrooms, you can eliminate one of those bedrooms by permit to accommodate an accessory dwelling unit. The flows into the wastewater system are the same, and therefore you can get a permit. If it's more than 3 bedrooms, for instance, 4 or 5, so 5 bedrooms with 70 thereafter, it's essentially you have to lose 2. You have to go from 5 down to 3 to accommodate 1 additional, as long as you have a compliant system in place. The trick is the compliance system.
And how do you get rid of a bedroom?
It's by permit. You simply have a permit that says, I no longer have 3 bedrooms.
You're
Okay.
basically promising to not to have 3 bedrooms anymore in your house. You're promising to only use 2 of those as bedrooms and use the other one as your study or something, right?
I'm just chuckling to myself because I'm like, do the kids go with the bedroom too? You know, the 29-year-old, does he go also when I get rid of the bedroom?
Definitely want to, yeah, definitely have them move on. Yeah.
I'm joking.
So there was a question here about you asked about whether septic needs are based on bathrooms or bedrooms, and it's based on bedrooms. Someone asked, could we? So one person wants to know, when will the town wastewater system be ready to help facilitate accessory dwelling units? It's a great question. We don't currently have a town wastewater system, but there is a planning study that the planning department planning commission is doing to look into whether that might be appropriate. And certainly, if there were a wastewater system, it would be a lot easier to deal with this because you wouldn't have to worry about reconfiguring your septic system. Okay, someone wanted to know, what are just the basic minimum requirements? So here's the question. We have an attic, currently livable but unheated. We assume we would have to have a bathroom. Do we need a kitchen? Also, does it have to have a separate entrance? Tyler, do you want to tackle these?
Sure. Yeah, they definitely need to have a separate entrance. You can have a shared entrance as long as it has there'd be a vestibule or something right in the inside, and then fire doors rated so that you go. We have had, I have seen that. So they're separate entrances with a shared exterior. I don't know if that makes sense. They have to have a kitchen and they have to have a bathroom. So you can't use it. It can't be a shared kitchen. It has to be a standalone unit. What was the other part of the question there?
I think those were the main issues, right? They're gonna have to have like either a separate entrance or a vestibule, right? So they would have, distinct access. They would need a kitchen. They need a bathroom. Yeah. Okay. Jeff Goodrich, did you have something else you wanted to add?
Yeah, just quickly, I think Rod Francis has been pretty good with respect to addressing stuff like access, et cetera, building codes. And I'm sure with Aaron and Rod, the same will be true. So, ask Aaron and you'll get the answer.
Great. Aaron, that's actually a good time to ask you if someone had some more questions about, they were interested. They're like, oh, I heard about ADUs. I've been thinking about this for a while. I can't believe that there have been 16 of them, in the last few years here in Norwich. How would they go about finding out more information, if they wanted to talk through their situation?
Yeah, so anyone who is interested is welcome to reach out to me and schedule a time to meet with me, either via Zoom or at Tracy Hall. The planning webpage on the town website, at the top of it has my contact info with my email and my phone number if anyone wants to reach out and communicate with me.
Great. Really appreciate that. And of course, for the state program, both the program that funds ADUs and the program that funds wastewater, that would be the Wyndham and Windsor Housing Trust. We'll send out, I think, a follow-up message to the listserv with Aaron's contact information and the contact information for this program. Brian, any other thoughts here about kind of parting thoughts you want to leave people with?
Yeah, I'd say neither Jeff nor I are in any place to give you advice on what to do with your homes. But this topic is under discussion by this group because it's an element, as Jeff said at the beginning, of our town's housing strategy. And we think if people think seriously about ADUs, that can expand the types of housing that the town offers and increase its accessibility to folks in a lot of different stages in their lives. It's great to hear how many ADUs are happening, but as we heard tonight, not all ADUs have the same purpose, and nor are they executed in the same way. And so we actually don't know to what extent they're actually being rented out as opposed to being used by relatives, or rented out to low-income individuals in our community as opposed to at a market rate to graduate students. That's just not something that the town is able to know. And so the final request really is to you. If you are serious going down this road, reach out to us and talk to us about your decision making, the kinds of things you're hearing from some of the professionals on this call or elsewhere. We would just love to learn about your experience and how it goes so we can share that with others. That's a really valuable part of this subcommittee's work. So thanks.
That's a great point, Brian. And the Planning Commission's also in the process of, as I understand it, reviewing the zoning regulations. And so if you do bump up against constraints, right, in the zoning regulations that are making it more difficult than necessary for you to develop an ADU or frankly do whatever other type of development you're interested in, let us know. Can't promise we'll necessarily be able to fix it, but we really do want to make the regulations as friendly as possible for people to do legitimate things. And sometimes there's just, Aaron was even saying, there's this sort of strange distinction, right, between, detached and attached, and, there might be some updating that's needed. So there are a couple of questions here, but we are going to, yeah. So someone wants to know if they can get ADU funding for a commercial property, like above a landscaper's garage. Tyler, do you know that?
Well, it would have to depend on the zoning, right? So if it's zoned as commercial only, then I would think that you could go through a process, and that would be something like you said, like maybe it can be changed there. I don't know what the zoning is, but as long as the town would allow it at that location, then sure, it would just have to meet all the other requirements. But I think, I'm not sure. I mean, because it has to be a primary residence, right? So it's going to be residential, right? So I'm not sure if that's just, if you're talking about like where an office space that you rent out on the first floor. You see that sometimes with a living space, an apartment right upstairs. I'm trying to figure out where that would come into. Aaron, help me.
Yeah, so an accessory dwelling unit, it has to be accessory to a primary dwelling. So commercial doesn't count as a primary dwelling.
Yeah.
Right, that's what I was saying, is that it could be somebody's primary dwelling, right, where they have a house, right? I don't know, because in some places you can have more than one ADU, right? And I don't know what your rules are in Norwich. So they could have their second floor of their house is their living, where they live, in their primary residence. They rent out the first floor to a law office, and then they could build an ADU in their backyard.
Great.
Getting pretty dicey there, but we've seen similar type of things where it's.
Great. All right. Well, thanks, Tyler.
Jeff and Brian will talk into this.
We're happy to follow up if people have more specific questions, and just trying to keep it to an hour here. Patty, you had a quick question?
Just real quick, just a quick question. How does an ADU impact our real estate taxes? Does anyone know?
Aaron, do you want to tackle that, or Tyler?
I'm the
I-
wrong
I
person
can-
to ask that question.
I mean, I can just say what I've seen historically. They actually, they can make your taxes go up, and some people, in depending on what you do. If you're doing interior conversion and you've turned a 3-bedroom house into, I'm sorry, what was it? 5-bedroom house into a 3-bedroom house. So Jeff doesn't correct me, whatever. It probably won't make the value go up. Actually, if you look around at, Zillow or whatever it is, multifamilies oftentimes go for less money than a single family home of comparable size and bathrooms and blah, blah, blah. It's, so I have not seen it change that much. There are sometimes, the tax rate depends on some places, whether, the multifamilies and single families have a different tax rate, and it shouldn't change it to a multifamily tax rate. It should still stay single family.
I will
As
say
an
this,
ADU.
there are people who are concerned about the appraisal going up because now you have the ability to generate rent. And so that would be something to look into if you're going to be sensitive to that, as most people are.
Well, I would think that if you're doing it to
Jen, one second.
sorry, I just wanted to say, if you're doing this to support lower income people and also to help with your own real estate taxes, it defeats the purpose of what, the ADU is supposed to be doing, which is helping people who can't afford to, have a decent housing. And it should be, I would hope that maybe Norwich or the state of Vermont would be able to assist people who are trying to do good by helping others, helping us with our real estate taxes in the meantime. So,
Jeff, we have another hand up from Jim.
Yeah, I see. Jim?
Yeah, there's 2 answers to this question, and Patty, I'll get to your part second. The first, the sort of basic thing is that your house is taxed, at least your underlying state rate property tax is taxed at the residential rate. That's adjusted by local spending, as you know, go to town meeting. When you create an ADU, that part is no longer residential. It's not part of your residence. And that is taxed at the non-residential rate, basically commercial rate. And whether or not that helps probably your appraisal goes up, but the net effect will depend on local taxes as much as residential, non-residential. Your question about, geez, and we're trying to help people and you're going to raise our taxes came up in Thetford just a few days ago. Same identical issue. And the short answer is right now the rules is rules, is Thurgood Marshall said, and it's something we ought to look into. And with everything, there's nuances and differences, but if people are trying to help low-income people who need a place to live, that's admirable. Other people in the same configuration will be really just trying to make a buck and use the tax rates, whatever they are, to their advantage. So I suspect very strongly that the legislature will begin looking at this in January and see where we end up. And people on this call, both residents of Norwich and Thetford, and also our resources that are here, will highly likely want to come and testify. And I couldn't predict where we'll end up, except that we know from people in your town that some people, it is said, take advantage of tax rate situation, whether their property is residential or they live 6 months in a day in Florida and have their property taxed as non-residential. And we'll have to look into that and see where we end up. Because the more people get creative, the more complicated the tax structure gets.
Right.
And so we'll just have to see what we can do. And any input from people here or outside this call would be very welcome, because we need to hear from everybody to try to sort this out. Thank you.
Great. Jim, I just want to add that this issue has come up before. If you promise to accept a below market rate rent, could you have that below market rate rent be what counts as the value of that rental property, right? Be used for valuation rather than the true market rent. And there's a precedent for this, right? Because with shared equity home ownership, your property taxes, I believe in Vermont, are determined by the resale value of your home under the legal agreement and not by the actual market value of the property. So it's really a very similar concept that we would be applying to, but there would need to be, I think, some kind of binding agreement. We need to figure out kind of how you would monitor and enforce that, which I think raises some questions, but maybe, maybe there's just a form that people can fill out. I see Dan has his hand up. Dan?
All right. So I don't want to wade too much into the politics, but since we have our representative here, I've had this thought, and you basically just mentioned it, that so, and my experiences in Burlington recently, slums, awful slums are $3,000 a month or something like that. And so they go in and, they do it, they try to assess, but they look at the place and they say, it's a slum. We're not going to assess it very highly, but it rents for just as much as another place. So, and then, but they have the other side, which is sometimes landlords get screwed. People don't pay. So I had this idea that you basically could have the taxes for rentals based on the income they receive. There's fuzziness, obviously, because some houses need more maintenance and some include heat, blah, blah, blah. But it would give incentives for people to fix them up, for one, and not rent, awful places. And then the other thing is that if someone doesn't pay, a landlord doesn't go bankrupt, because all of a sudden they get a reduction in their rent. So it's kind of a win-win, and it gives incentive for people to charge less than $1,400 for a tiny apartment above a garage, which is what's happening now.
Yeah. No, thank you for that comment. I think one of the questions has always been, and Brian raised it, how do we ensure that when we add an ADU, we're actually getting an affordable unit, right? Rather than just another unit that's renting out at the max, and if there was an incentive in the property tax code to agree to rent it at a below market rent, that would be a nice win-win, right? For both the homeowner and for the public. Good thing Jim's here to hear the idea, and we'll have to see where that goes. I just want to thank you all. I feel like we kind of went over our time here, and we no longer have a quorum, I don't think, to approve the minutes. So I just want to say that since this is a public meeting, we do have an opportunity for people to have a public comment. So if anyone, I see Jim has his hand up, so why don't we see if Jim has anything to say, and then if anyone else has anything you want to say, please go ahead, and then we're just going to, I think, adjourn, so we can't approve the minutes. Jim.
Yeah, for the consultants, guests, and everybody out there, I understand there's some Dartmouth students that are looking into the issue of ADU, and what I asked them to do was create some sort of a matrix, maybe down the side, two fields, right? I mean, biaxial. Down the side, you could list towns, and across the top, you can list septic zoning requirements, size requirements, whatever there are. I would be interested in learning about commonalities and differences to see what things the legislature might do to streamline the process so that it's more predictable. And granted, we're not going to mess with local zoning or whatnot, but sometimes a tweak here and there would make it easier for people who want to do this so they know what they're getting into. And if anybody's interested in contributing to that, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jim. Tracy? You need to take yourself off mute, Tracy. Tracy, do you have something you want to say?
Yeah, sorry about that. Technical difficulties. Yeah, so once you create an ADU, someone mentioned the valuation difference between a single family versus I suppose, a dwelling with an ADU. When it comes to selling the house, it would probably be desirable not to have the ADU, is what I'm hearing everyone say. What's the process for removing that and turn it back into a single family? Do you have to remove everything Is it just a label versus well, is it just a label that you put on it? Thank you.
Tyler, is there a quick answer to that?
Well, I mean, yeah, the people have done that. They have removed, right? It's unless there's a covenant with some money that's come in, and then you lose some of that, like with prorated amount if you do get a grant from the state program. But otherwise, yeah, you're taking out your kitchen and whatever, turning a bedroom back into a bedroom. Or Patty was talking, you got to put the 29-year-old back there. You can have my 4-year-old if you want to put him back in there too. Put them together. I don't care. But yeah, you can do that. Actually, Burlington had for a while, and I'm not sure you actually had to remove your ADU if you were going to sell it. It was like, it was like pulling out the kitchen. It was terrible law that I think has now changed.
And I would not assume, by the way, that you necessarily would sell the home for less with an ADU. I could see a situation where people could sell it for more with an ADU because now you have a rental income. So I wouldn't necessarily automatically assume that it's a decline.
That's actually a really good point. That it's highly variable.
Yeah. So let's hear from Rooted Gardens and then from Julie, and then I think we'll call it a day. So go ahead, Rude. Can't hear you here. Not hearing you. Does anyone hear? You could put your, wait, talk now.
Connected. Can you hear me now? Sorry about the technical difficulties.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, Bluetooth issues. So a comment I guess I have is I think it would be wise to drop the size limit in comparison to the principal house's size. It just seems to be a barrier for the people who may need the income more to put the dwelling. Meaning if you have a huge house, you may not really see the same incentive as someone who has a small house if you connect house size with income. So I guess what I'm saying is I suggest that the Planning Commission talk about getting rid of that in our next iteration of the ordinances, the zoning laws.
Okay, great. Thanks for that.
I could say something interesting about that. Just because you build the primary residence, you can move into, or you could be living in the ADU. And we have people who build ADUs and then live in them. So say you have a one-room cabin that's just 400 square feet, and then you build a 1,600 or 2,000 square foot house in the back. You're living in the ADU. The other one becomes the ADU, or you rent, or I don't know how. There's different configurations. I do see what you're saying though, as a possibility for.
Yeah, and that's a great strategy. I think that's really good. I think we should take down the barrier so that it doesn't have to be like a creative thought like that. And that almost seems sneaky when it comes to like the development side of it. But I agree. I think that's a good idea. I just think we might as well take down that barrier. That's it.
Thanks for that comment. Julie?
Oh, hi, folks. I really enjoyed this session. I don't live in Norwich. I live in Heartland, but I recently relocated from California, having lived there about 40 years, and ADUs are hot commodities for the same reasons you folks are all looking at the efficacy for your communities. And I can tell you, hands down, they add value to the properties back there. And a lot of the communities in Sonoma County where I lived were offering wonderful incentives to help with the housing crisis for the same reasons some of you folks are talking about, and making homes available for people. So yeah, no question how it turned out in California. They definitely add value. Thank you.
Thank you. So, well, thanks all for coming. I don't think we need a motion to adjourn since we don't have a quorum anymore. So just want to thank Tyler again for taking time away from his 4-year-old who almost
Oh,
succeeded.
thank
in
you
away.
so much. I really, I mean, my wife is gonna kill me. Are you kidding me? I can see her fumes from here.
So one other
Thank
thing,
you.
one other thing to add before we go, Jeff, is for those of you who don't know, this subcommittee has monthly meetings. We talk about all kinds of great stuff. Come to the next meeting. We would really love to have you.
And we're transparent.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Appreciate it.
Have a good night.
Have a good night. Hope you build
Thanks, everyone.
ADUs.
Bye.